LoLFanDuel.com League of Legends stream. Our first ever, I think it actually might be. As you all know, it is a new world out there, a brave new world, some could say, where we are now turning to the esports world to try to find our joy, both in our NBA 2K simulations every day here on the Osmo channel, as well as the world of League of Legends. And you might have seen the boss man, Osmo, start to take down some tournaments. So we're going to give you guys some of the data he's using, as well as insights from a new staffer we have here, who I'll introduce in one moment here. I'm Chris Spags, joined for the first time on this stream by a man who knows League of Legends very well. He's had some content on our site already if you want to dig in while we're doing the show. Mr. Jeremy Schritt, how are you doing, Jeremy?
I'm okay. I woke up and I also had a good last LPL night, so it's feeling good. Yeah,
you're a tout now, Jeremy. You got to be like, had some really big winnings here.
Oh yeah, no, I did win a tournament last night. So like,
you bigged one. Okay, so you got all the bona fides.
So we're in a good mood today.
All right, so we got a good move. Let's carry it over right now. And of course, if you want to check out, so we have a lot of data right now that you might not be familiar with at Osmo.com. Osmo's released his own projections for this slate, which you can check out right now at Osmo.com/esports. If you go on there, you can also find Jeremy's articles. He's got a couple primer articles, which we're going to dig through here. And just so you guys are familiar now, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be giving a primer on everything you need to know. I'm coming in with this. I really have only read Jeremy's articles, regrouped with one of my friends to get some just a little bit more insight, but really I know as little as you guys may watching this one. Jeremy's an expert. Osmo's figured out the projection model. So those are the things you really need to know. So we're going to take it from square one. But Jeremy, you mentioned your success yesterday. So let's give a little bit of a briefer on you here. How did you get into League of Legends DFS in the first place, or gaming? I mean, take us back to square one, because you are on really a lot of untreaded ground with your knowledge base with this sport.
So League came out like a decade ago, and I had a group of friends be like, you should play League of Legends. And I was like, all right, cool. And then the esports scene at the time was really like immature and new. But there was a tournament. It's always season one tournament was like, it was in a basement, right? There were like 20 chairs and like no one was watching, but I was watching with my friends. And so I've just kind of been hooked because I like sports. I am a big sports guy. So the concept of competition within a game that I enjoy playing was really something that like caught my attention. The DFS side didn't come until a few years later, like 2015 or 2016 on different sites. But then DraftKings picked it up and I've just kind of been playing ever since.
So yeah, I guess when did you first start playing the DFS side, and what made you take that leap? I know you said you were interested in sports, but going from just kind of being a bypass, or I guess a bypass would be the best way to put it, but just an observer, a watcher of the games to actually playing DFS. Like, were you a guy who wanted to play and thought maybe you could make a run at being a pro, and then you were like, well, I can't do that, so I might as well go that way, as many of us do, I'm sure, with the mainstream sports?
Oh, I was never close enough to being a pro at League of Legends. But I've been playing like fantasy sports since I was 11. So when DFS started coming out, like I would dabble in that already. And I was like, I think I know more at League of Legends than other people do. So the next step was then to just play for money. And yeah, it was the wild, wild west back then. It was crazy. But I mean, it was for most DFS sports.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was working in the content side of things, I was working with Barstool Sports, and they were partnered with Draft Street at the time. And that was when a lot of the guys who we know now as like, multimillionaire touts who were like just making money because people wouldn't remember to set lineups and wouldn't remember to check starters. So League of Legends not quite there, but still, relatively, I would say, new ground for a lot of people to be playing in these tournaments, you would think, right?
Oh, yeah. That's something that I've noticed even within the last week is that the people who typically don't play League of Legends DFS, they're smarter about the general process of DFS things. So you tend to see like more cohesive like construction and lineup building and like differences within their lineups than you would have seen like 2 weeks ago before anything happened. It was easier 2 weeks ago. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, guys like Osmo jumping in will change the field a little bit there. And,
yeah.
And I'm sure you saw he was playing himself as well, trying to get into the head of the athletes. And
yeah. It's been fun to read his tweets about this new excursion.
And it's worth noting there are really big tournaments coming up tomorrow, which is part of why we are doing the stream and also taking it from square one. On DraftKings in particular, there are tournaments between 20,000 and 50,000 up top. The main event one is one which we'll have a live before lock show tomorrow with Osmo and Sal Vetri going live at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. East Coast time, breaking down, or actually I guess an hour before that's when it locks. But they'll be doing that tomorrow. So subscribe, hit the notification bell if you want the last minute updates there. But yeah, a lot more money in the tournaments there. So it's going to be a big part of it. And again, free projections for you guys at osmo.com/esports right now, as well as all of Jeremy's content he's written for us so far. And if you're not familiar as well, before we get into all the finer points of this, we're going to also be doing the NBA 2K stuff going on again tonight. FanDuel is partnering with us on that, doing tournaments as well. A little bit slower on the League of Legends uptick, though they're getting in there, but they have been very much on board with our NBA 2K bracket challenge we're having. So go check out those tournaments for yourself on FanDuel right now. They're promoting it everywhere all over their site and through their email. And those games have been a lot of fun. Tonight you'll have Josh, Ben Rasa, and Lofty taking you through again here on the channel later tonight. So once again, subscribe, hit that notification bell. All right, Jeremy, so we're going real stupid here. Let's say just for my sake, but also obviously for the sake of all you watching, I'm going to assume we're all at a similar knowledge base. So let's go from the first jump here, Jeremy. How are points scored in League of Legends DFS? What are the ways that it adds up? You know, the other sports, we have the touchdowns are going to be the most valuable thing for the most part, but then you have the smaller things, just gaining yards. So I guess how does that break down for League of Legends? And I know you did a lot of comparisons to other sports. So if you want to make any comparisons, go ahead, but just as simple as you can, how are points scored?
Points are scored primarily by kills and assists. You get 3 points for a kill. You get 2 points for an assist. Getting a kill just means that you took the opposing champion's health bar to 0. Like your damage brought them to 0. You get a kill. You get 3 fantasy points. If you helped in any way to get the health bar to 0, you get an assist. You get 2 points. There are miscellaneous things similar to yards. It's called creep score. 4 of the roles typically get an okay amount of creep score every game, and 50 creep score gets you 1 fantasy point. There are minions that are running down the lane. You kill them, you last hit them, you get 0.02 fantasy points. So yeah, 50 of them gets you 1 fantasy point. You also lose a death, or you lose a point for a death, but deaths are kind of like turnovers. When you have a lot of them, they matter. But if you have like 2 or 3 of them, it's probably not going to kill you.
Okay, so that establishes a baseline there. And you know, I know the creep kills are an important part of it, and that's something that did jump out to me. Is it 50 creeps killed for 1 point? So we're saying that's the equivalent of like 1 yard, or 10 yards.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
So how many creep kills would we expect from, I mean, it's going to vary by position, I'm sure, but like what's the normal output for that you would want to be targeting? Is that the main way these guys are going to be deriving their value, or is that just something that's kind of an added bonus factor?
Yeah, it's really kind of an added bonus. It's like the really good players get 9 to 10 CS a minute. Those would be your mid laners and your AD carries. They typically get like 9 to 10 each minute. The top laners get a little bit less than that, and the junglers less than that. And then your supports can get like 30 in a 30-minute game. So basically, it doesn't matter. Except for there's a game on right now where the support's farming. So you can't predict that though. Like you don't know that's going to happen before the game starts.
So I guess, I mean, this is sort of a higher level question, but how do these strategies change for these teams game to game? I mean, I'm sure it's a lot like an NFL game where you have sometimes a game plan you would think is going to go the way that it's expected, where you expect a team to pass on a team that's terrible in pass defense, but sometimes the teams will go against the grain and run against a team as bad against pass defense because that's either their MO or what they feel like they should do to differentiate. So how does strategy come into this for the teams? Like, is there some degree of predictability with that, or is it just something where you're trying to go with your gut and figure out based upon the other team's performance and what they do, how the other team will adjust in advance?
So League of Legends has 148 champions. So there are a lot of different viable ways to go about like compositions of teams. Within any like particular meta, there are probably like 30 to 40 like top tier selections. Things that you'll see like every game or almost every game or like multiple times in a slate. So you need to kind of have like you need to kind of know what the popular champions are and then what teams play them or are allowed to play them.
So champions are just the players, right? Or like the individual
No. The champions are the like stuff that's like doing the damage, like the characters that are just running down, getting the last hits and stuff.
Okay, so all right, so now we're going real square one. So the
Yeah,
champions are like the equivalent of the athletes within like NBA 2K. Like if you were playing as
yeah.
LeBron.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're playing NBA 2K. You're playing as Shaq, but you're not actually Shaq.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay, so
like if Shaq like dunked on a kid and is like, all right, Shaq got +3. You're like, all right, sick.
okay, all right, so we're on the same page now. I know I play Overwatch, which is kind of a comparable game, not the same layout,
Oh
but
yeah, no. Then
yeah.
you're familiar enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're there. It's heroes, but yeah, that's basically what it is. So champions are just the individual characters, the sprites in the game themselves. So
Yep.
are there more popular champions than there are? Like, is that how does that work? Like, is that something you're analyzing in advance, or are you just kind of going off the player themselves and what they normally do? Like, how are you looking at from a data modeling perspective? Are you trying to is it like if this guy's all of a sudden on champion A instead of champion B that you're expecting a worse performance, or how does that work?
It's hard to know until metas change every few weeks. Like the game patches every like 2 to 4 weeks, and the game kind of goes in cycles. A player could be really good in one patch and then really bad in another patch, but you're probably not going to know until it happens. So you just kind of project that they're going to continue their success or lack of success until they like show you otherwise.
Gotcha. Okay, so a little bit of show and prove there. I guess you could kind of look at it like the equivalent of a rookie stepping into a league there, where you don't know how they're going to go, but you do have a baseline of how they performed in previous
Mm-hmm.
leagues, or even a guy moving to a new team. I think that could be kind of a comparable situation. Sometimes wide receivers in the NFL lose some of their upside when they move to a new spot. A guy like Austin Hooper this offseason probably going to get less looks in Cleveland than he did in Atlanta. But all right, so we're getting a little more to the meta game, but let's take it back one more step here because I know people open up their apps and be like, what is LPL? What's LCK? And I'll give the quick view on it. LPL is the Chinese league, LCK the South Korea league, LEC the Europe league, and LCS is the one we're going to find a lot of our biggest tournaments. That is the North American league. But Jeremy, what are the differences between all those four, and are there appreciable differences that people would want to take note of?
The LPL and the LCK have best of threes, so their game totals are going to be much higher because they play multiple games.
Mhm.
I would say that a good target score in those games to like get first is 650, but last night kind of blew that out of the water. So because the LPL is actually just the craziest league, it's ridiculous. Last night you had like two minus or plus 550 guys or teams winning. It was crazy. Um, LEC and LCS, they both play best of ones, which means scoring tends to be about a third of what you would expect it to be with the best of threes. It doesn't change too much, but it changes a little bit. The LEC tends to be higher scoring than the LCS and is kind of a light version of the LPL. So yeah.
So in the LPL and LCK, then are you trying to stack games that you think will go to all three because of the higher upside they have? Like, is that the equivalent of being able to try to identify an overtime game, let's say in the NBA?
So the thing is that in the scoring you get 20 points per player for the games that aren't played, and 15 points
Okay.
for the team that are not played. That for the games that they don't play. A lot of the times in games that you lose, you're not going to get that. There are exceptions to that, but you don't ever project that.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes some more sense then. All right, so don't project that, so that's not something to even consider or worry about. And if it happens, I mean, there are some ways it could break badly for you, I presume, where if a team did get that third game and then went nuts and outscored the bonuses that would come for not playing that game, that could screw you over. But it's better just to assume that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, because like the general thing that I'm pretty sure this is for most DFS sports is you don't project like crazy things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like you account for it and you expect it to happen sometimes, but you're not going to be like, oh, such and such is going to turn the ball over 10 times today, even though it might happen. Like you just don't do that.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, it's like predicting a blowout, which is something we talk about a lot on this channel. You can't predict a blowout. You got to play it straight. And I guess just overall from your observation, I don't know if you have any hard data on this, but do you feel like those series, the Chinese and the South Korean league, the LPL and LCK, do you feel like those tend to go more to best of threes, or do they usually tend to be just the team wins 2-0 and then that's it?
Well, obviously, it like depends on the team. So, like VG last night, before last night was they had played like 5 of 6 series, I think it was, that went to 3. And today, in today's LPL slate, DMO has played 1 best of 3 out of 5. So it really just depends on teams, but it's this is like I'm gonna use an MMA thing. Like MMA has like knockouts and submissions and stuff. Like DMO is a team that has like knockouts and submissions, and Vichy is like playing for a decision.
Gotcha. Okay, so they're trying to drag it out for the most part. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a thing that you learn as you go, I'm sure, with many of these. And obviously, using the projections that we have at osmo.com/esports give you a bit more of a read there. But okay, interesting. So I think we've covered that. I guess my question, and this is maybe not the most relevant to actual DFS, but just because we are kind of taking it from ground level here, is there a sort of playoff series at the end between all of these, or like the Champions League and the European leagues where all these guys compete, from the Chinese League, the South Korea League, and the U.S. League or the North American League at the end, or is it just they're all separate and they're all operating independently?
So there are 2 splits in each league. There's a spring split and there's a summer split. The playoff winners from the summer split will go to a world championship in October. I think this year. I'm pretty sure it's in October, but it's sometime later in the year where they all come together. And it's not just those 4 leagues. They have leagues from Japan and like South America and like other like Russia. I'll just say Russia because it's basically just Russia and Australia. Like smaller leagues that congregate. It's kind of like the World Cup, where they just bring in a whole bunch of people and they fight and want to crown a champion.
Okay, that makes sense. So there is some sort of process at the end. Also, shout out Jack Perry for the super chat saying, good to see your beautiful face, Spags. I feel like good to see Jeremy's beautiful face for the first time too, but we appreciate the support. And obviously we're doing as much as we can to keep you guys informed throughout all this information and keep you guys entertained on the channel. And look, I'm playing League of Legends tomorrow. Apparently the boss man's playing it in the chat as well. So this is the time to get on board here. Let's keep going through some of the primer items we need to know here, Jeremy. Where do you find the core stats to review? For basketball, you go to a site like Basketball for reference. You can pull pretty much everything you need if you wanted to build your own projections or just have a data sheet to look at. For the NFL, there's a million different sites as well. PFF, one that we've used a lot. So where are you going, or where would a player want to go to see the core stats that they would know? So, a lot of people don't like to rely just on our projections, even though that is what we would advocate for. If you want to dig in a little deeper, where would you go to see these guys' stats from different performances that they've had?
So the best place to find statistics on teams and players is gol.gg. So if you go there, you're going to be able to find stats on teams, how many deaths per game they have, how long their games last, how many kills they get, basically every stat that you could want to help you be smarter, you're going to find there.
And okay, and then what are the core stats that we're looking at on there? Like you talked about the kills, some of the creeper kills and those things like that, and then deaths overall. So which are the core stats you would look at that you find to be predictable or that people may be, like what's the noisy stats and what are the ones that are the most relevant to what's actually going to happen on the field, so to speak?
So for players, you're going to want to look at kill participation, because if they're participating in kills, that means they're getting kills or assists. That's what kill participation is. If you participate in any way in a kill, you're going to get 2 or 3 points, and that's how you're going to score most of your points. So if you have a 70% kill participation, then in any game that is like a high kill game, you're probably going to be really involved in it, and you want that. The fluff stats, there really aren't that many fluff stats. Like there are fluff stats on here that are like not at all relevant to daily fantasy sports. But basically, like team kills per game, team deaths per game, how long their games last, how many towers they kill, how many dragons they kill, how many barons they kill.
Oh, we're killing dragons? Oh, it bums me.
Yeah, we're killing dragons. Feels bad.
Made me real sad during Game of Thrones. I assume I'll have the same emotional response.
No, it's going to happen a lot.
Pour one out.
None of the stats are really bad or useless.
Also, a real fast shout out to Twitch and Periscope. I'm seeing your guys' chats as well in our YouTube chat, so we appreciate all you guys tuning in, regardless of what platform you're on, as we brave this new world for some of us. Not a new world for Jeremy. Thankfully, he is here to bring us through all the dragon murder that we need to know. Core stats. One question I have, because you mentioned kill participation, are we looking at deaths on the other side? Are some teams more prone to dying more, whether it be strategically or just because they're not quite as good? Is that something you're looking at to weigh against it? Or is that kind of like a DVP stat where we don't really look at that because it's not quite as valuable as it may seem?
It factors in a little bit. Like there are extreme cases where like teams are dying a lot more, like 16, 17 times a game. And then you kind of want to be like, okay, who's dying a lot and why are they dying a lot? And so it's marginally useful. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So marginally useful, but not something to look at as like, if you're not onto something, if you're like, wow, this team's dying a lot, they're probably going to die a lot today. It's not necessarily something you'd want to target.
Uh, it's okay to target it, but you're not gonna I don't know how I want to word this. It's something to consider when building everything. It's not like the key point. It's like
Like a tiebreaker
a
of some sort.
tertiary point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I would say that the equivalency, again, if you follow our basketball concept, we do not like DVP generally. Definitely don't like BVP in baseball, but DVP for centers can be valuable to learn because centers give up a certain guaranteed amount of production, and that could be a boost for a guy who's competent. So if you have a high depth team, perhaps you'd have a guy on the other side, and you have competency on the other side. That could be something that could trickle down. Are we utilizing sportsbook lines is a question I would have, because a lot of what we build in our modeling at Osmo is built around the concept of Vegas sportsbooks and, of course, the lines across the world. And for League of Legends, are there lines out there? Are there ones that you're using as kind of the jumping off point to build from down there? Or is it just you're going off of some other metrics?
I look at lines like very frequently because they're good. They make money. It's what they do. Would be silly not to utilize their knowledge for my benefit. A lot of the times they're pretty good. Last night they were not good, but like that's the LPL, right? Sometimes crazy stuff happens, and yeah, but yeah, it's something that I use and I look at because they tend to follow the same pricing, or the big favorites are going to be the most expensive players on the slate, and it tends to follow the lines that are set.
How much variance do you find in these games? Because I know there are some sports that have more than others. Baseball, pretty predictable because of how that goes, but you'll still have days where things end up completely out of left field, particularly with some of the Vegas lines. But how often do you feel like things are going according? Like, is it any different than the other sports? Because I know with the XFL, that was another new sport, or new league rather, that I was trying to prognosticate here before its untimely demise. Rest in peace here for this year, at least XFL. But like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel the lines are mostly efficient, or do you feel like there's still a bit of an edge there in terms of how they are versus what the actual results end up being?
Some lines I look at I feel are wrong, which is weird because I shouldn't be more correct than they are. But sometimes I'll look at a line and be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. For like, as an example, LNG a few nights ago when they were playing Victory 5, they were like minus 475 against the worst team in the league, like the worst team. Sure, they ended up losing a game, but if you asked me before the game started, I'd be like, this is way too low for like a good team facing the worst team. So I want to take advantage of that as much as I can. It didn't work out, but most of the time you can identify like small little differences. I don't know. Yeah, like between your thought process and their thought process.
And obviously, you would say if a person were jumping in for the first time with no knowledge base, it's better just to follow the lines for the safety of that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Like they're smart, and like they're smart. You should follow them anyway. They're just like correct a lot of the time.
Yeah, they're a good benchmark. Obviously, a thing we advocate for in all the other sports, and certainly it's not going to be any different, though. That's why you follow Jeremy's content on our site now. Osmo.com/esports is where you'll find that. But there are going to be some edges, but better to trust the professionals with that rather than try to make that guesswork yourself, because there's a reason that casinos still get built even when the world goes to crap. Where do people reliably find starters? I know we talk a lot about fantasy schmabs for the NBA, but if there was an issue the other day, I know that we had in our first run of projections, and not, Osmo fixed it as fast as he could, but initially had an incorrect starter in there, and some people in the community did point it out, and ended up being very helpful for some folks, because a lot of people had that initial starter in there in tournaments, and then were like, I think I don't know the ownership because I haven't followed that closely, but I did see people complaining about one guy being owned and he just didn't play. So where are you finding starters reliably where you can trust them and they'll be in?
Starters for league are weird. The LPL is the only league that has a random person that happens to work in the scene post them every day on Twitter. It's the weirdest thing, but this guy every day at about the same time, he goes on Twitter, he posts them, and we thank that guy, because otherwise we would have no idea. The LCK, due to Korean laws, don't let you know starting lineups until the players walk out on the area. It's the weirdest. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. But LEC and LCS, their lineups tend to not change that much unless someone is being substituted. And to check for substitutes, you're going to check teams' Twitters, their Instagrams, just general social media. Just look at their social medias, and they will post about it and let you know that there's a substitute, and that's basically it.
Got it. Okay, so for the most part with LEC and LCS, you're playing it straight and just keeping track on the mainstream sources. There's no sort of underground there that
Yep.
tracking. Okay. Any under the radar resources that you might advocate for as somebody who's done this for so long? Like one thing Jeremy and I talked about this before we came on the air. I have a friend who's been very much into the, let's say the nerd world in a positive way for as much as possible, was about as early on Bitcoin as anybody. And unfortunately we did not buy in as much then, but still got a little bit nice jump before everything went to crap there. But he asked me to ask you, like, do players' public ranks have any impact on their play? Is that something you're looking at, or is it just, the competition only stats, or anything else that you think might be a bit of an edge that you personally go to? Is there anything you would advocate for people out there to take a look at in addition to just the stats on the gol.gg site?
Nothing like that's super solid, but if you're watching the games, you can kind of get a public perception on how like teams are perceived. And that's something that you can use when building lineups to try and find players that might not be as popular that should be, because perception is like a very big deal, and it's hard to gauge perception. And for League of Legends, at least, like there are a lot of public figures that'll have very strong opinions about teams and players that might not be totally correct.
Got it. So, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And public perception, always a thing too with the public money. We talk about that a lot with Vegas, where the sharp money comes in late, and that tends to be a little bit of a smarter bet coming in. So certainly the same principles as Jeremy mentioned earlier, a lot of the same principles for the other sports you will find with League of Legends, even though it feels like a whole new world to be swimming into. And we talked about this a little bit, but I just to close the loop on this segment that we had planned, what is the impact of patches on the game? I know you said it's just basically you see it when you see it and how it changes, but are there places where people are discussing the patches and the ramifications in advance of a new tournament, or how often is the game being patched? Like, how does that all work?
So patches will have a list of patch notes every 2 to 6 weeks. It depends on just the cycle, how long stuff takes to get done. There's not really like a set time, but between 2 and 6 weeks, the game's going to change some amount. And there are people, usually it's on like Reddit or Twitter or Instagram, and people will discuss this. Usually it's Reddit, the League of Legends subreddit, that'll discuss like who's going to be good now and who's going to be bad now. But a lot of it might not be applicable to pro play because the pros are smart and they know more than we do, and they do things differently than the normies do. So like, you don't know until you see it, I guess.
This is just a general question, and I think it's something that we all think about with esports whether we're watching, the NBA 2K league, the actual league, not the one that we're doing for our Osmo streams, or even, I mentioned I play Overwatch. Like I'm always curious, like what the gap is between me as somebody who's like pretty good and like and ranked well, I've been up to diamond, but what's the difference between an average player who's like pretty good versus a pro player? Would you say, like, what is it the equivalent of like a guy who plays tennis occasionally and Roger Federer, or is it quite a little bit less than that?
It's probably about that. Like these guys are playing 12 to 14 hours a day. So me, who might play like an hour or two every few days, and like not even close. Not even close.
Gotcha. Okay. So we've covered most of the baseline ones here. We are going to get in some of the lineup construction things and also just talk about each position. I know some people in the chat right now seem to be a little bit smarter and aware of this. So we apologize if you guys do already know some of this stuff, but we're trying to make a video here and a series of videos to try to make sure that people who are just getting in for the first time can do it. So help us out. Hit that like button. Obviously, a new thing we're doing here content-wise at Osmo, and Jeremy's first show here. So give us some love here and hit that like button, and we'll keep going here. Position by position, Jeremy, I want to know here. I read your article. We have in our little production sheet that Jeremy and I are looking at. I just took quotes from his article because that was really the knowledge base I wanted to come in with. And I'll actually drop a link to your article as well so people could take a look for themselves. But go through the first position here. The top is one that people will see on top. no pun intended, and when they're building lineups here. But a top laner is a guy who I presume is operating the top, and you had it in the article listed as a third down back, a guy who can hit 7th or 8th in the lineup or on the second power play, likely to have the Slate's highest scorers and oftentimes have lower floors. So that's the way you introduced it in the article. But what would you say is the distillation here for a top laner? What are people looking for?
A top laner is typically, you want someone that's going to be involved with the team. They oftentimes have lower kill participations because they're left alone the most, which feels bad, but that's the life. They tend to play champions that are like have a lot of hit points and facilitate the team in a way that doesn't benefit them but benefits the team. Sometimes they're allowed to do their own thing and like kill stuff, but that's hard to trust and it's hard to predict unless you have a really good top laner and there's like a consistent baseline for that to happen.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's
So-
like, no, you go.
No, so a top laner, I guess, so my question is a top laner married to being up top, or is that just a strategic choice where they always put a guy up there because that's the best methodology to actually win? Like, are there teams that approach that differently where a top laner won't actually be in a top lane?
So a few years ago, you would have flipped the top lane and the bottom lane for like the start of the game. And that was just because for like strategic regions in that meta, it made sense to do that. It doesn't make sense to do that anymore, but the top laner will sometimes rotate like 8 to 12 minutes in the game, bot lane or mid lane, but it doesn't happen very frequently.
Gotcha. Okay. So
and it doesn't really change anything for them scoring.
Okay. So got it. So basically that role will operate as expected. There's no deviation there. It's pretty much they're going to do the same thing, even if they move around a little bit, or even if historically they have moved around for the most part, not much deviation there in what they're doing.
Yeah, they tend to kind of left on their own island most of the time.
Okay, another position here, JNG, the junglers. In your article, you had junglers are a weird role. They can impact every lane early game and look to facilitate objective control for their team. Teams utilize junglers differently, so if there's a team that really lets their jungler loose, it could be very good for DFS. Junglers are the most like tight ends that lead off or 2-hole hitters or your first line power play defender. So give us a little more detail on that here. The junglers, seems like they're a little more versatile. Tight ends, a lot of variability if you're comparing it to that role where you have the guys who get one catch for a touchdown or one catch for 1 yard. Then you have the George Kittle tier, the Travis Kelce tier of guys. So how would you say a jungler should be used here when you're building your lineups?
So you want a jungler who's going to be proactive, and that just means generally a higher kill participation early in the game to facilitate the mid lane or the top lane or even the bottom lane sometimes. They kind of correlate with everybody very loosely, and it changes game by game based on what champions are selected. So again, you don't know what's being selected before the slate starts. So it's hard to fully predict what's going to happen because, as you mentioned earlier, like a team might be bad against the pass and they might run, and a guy might gank mid lane like 80% of the time, but he might go bot lane this game. It's difficult to project completely and fully, but they have the most freedom on the map early game, and they typically like facilitating like 2v1s or 3v2s to get advantages for their team.
So would you feel like they're one of the more variable positions where they could really spike an upside or have like a pretty low? I know we have some other guys here that you specifically called out as being guys that could get you negative points, but is a jungler going to have a pretty high variability rate?
Yeah, they are the most in control of the game early on. So if they're going around making things happen, they will probably be scoring pretty well. And for most of the game, you might see them have the highest score. Sometimes that changes as the game goes on, as the AD carry or the mid laner gets stronger, and they're less needed to like facilitate the action. But early on, they have the most freedom to perform to a ceiling.
Gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense. So they're likely to rise with the tide of the team doing well, as it seems like. And
yeah, they are most oftentimes going to be the ones that help dictate how their team is doing early.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess would you feel like these guys? I know we're going to talk more about stacking, but do you feel like these guys would be a core part of most stacks you'd build if you were stacking a team?
Yes, but again, as you can be different and not do that. But typically, if you have like a jungler and a top laner together, or a jungler and a mid laner together, you're gonna feel pretty good if the jungler goes off and you have one of those, or the correct pair that goes off.
And I guess one question I would have here, I know this is one that everybody thinks about and probably one you need to worry about a little bit less in League of Legends DFS right now, but thinking from the general DFS mindset, let's say a jungler fails, but the team still does well. Who's the one who's more likely to do better if the jungler underperforms, but another player on the team, succeeds? Like, which position do you think benefits if the jungler is weak, but the rest of the team is playing well?
So the team's doing well, but it's not the jungler's part. Well, that's actually it's actually a really good question. There's nothing. It can be any of the lanes. Like sometimes matchups are just good for one lane and not good for another lane. So it really depends on what champions are selected in that game. I would say no knowledge and no like hard information. This is like mostly speculative, so like take it with a grain of salt. It's probably going to be the mid lane or the bot lane because they're usually given like they're the ones that do damage. So if they do the right damage at the right time, they can like snowball a lane more often than top lane can.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. And, again, just trying to bring the general DFS principles, and I'm putting Jeremy on the spot with some of these questions. So, don't hold him to the fire if something that I ask doesn't end up being right, but I'm trying to make sure we get all the angles in as best as I can see it as we go. Well, let's keep going down the list of your positions. Mid is one that you'll find when you're building positions. A mid laner. Mid laners are similar to centers in hockey, running backs, or receivers in football, in the middle of the lineup in baseball. This role can score, said Jeremy in the article. To take us through mid laners, what they seem like they're being an important part based on the comparisons you made. So do you consider mid laners to be a core part of what you're building when you're doing your lineups?
Yeah, so ideally if I'm going to stack a captain, a lot of the times I'll look for a mid lane captain or an AD carry captain because those two roles do the most damage. And if you're doing the most damage and you're getting the most gold, you're going to have the best chance of bringing someone's health bar to 0 and get kills, and you want kills to get points. So yeah, if I can get 2 mid laners or 2 AD carries in a lineup, it's something that I would like to have more often than not because they bring a higher ceiling than most of the other roles.
Gotcha. Okay, so and we're going to kind of do an overview on this at the end because I have some questions in chat here that I want to hit on, but I want to make sure that we get all the positions out there first. So an AD carry, you've mentioned them. I feel like I saw when I was doing my little research that historically they're called an attack damage carry, but I'm assuming AD carry is the usual vernacular to use here?
Yeah, AD carry, attack damage carry is just a shortening of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah.
So the ADC is what you'll see them on for the positions, but in Jeremy's article, he wrote, these are the big hitters, the Pat Mahomes and Mike Trouts of League of Legends DFS. Sure, they might not always be the team's highest scorer, but you expect going into any match, these individuals will be the ones given the most opportunity to score big. So it seems like you're implying there, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're implying this is a place where you want to spend your money. If you're going with a team that's good, this is a guy who should benefit the most. But I presume as well, by the same token, if you have an ADC who's on a team that's cheap and he actually does really well, he could have a higher ceiling. But explain here, like what are ADC or AD carries doing, and then also how important are they to your lineup build?
So ADCs are typically given the most amount of assistance to do the most everything.
So they're all around guys.
A support. Yeah. So they have literally someone in their lane babysitting them so that they can get farm and kills as like efficiently as possible. It's like literally that's what they're doing. They're being set up like, here's a silver platter. It's your job now. Like good luck, have fun. So yeah, definitely if you can find a team like last night, Vici was not owned. They went 2-0, and iBoy was a big part of that. And he was in the winning lineup. So if you can find a cheap AD carry that goes 2-0 or gets the victory, then that's excellent. That's really, really good.
Gotcha. Okay. So if you could find one that's a good value spot potentially, but also one where on some slates, I imagine you could have a slate breaker at this position where if a guy's, I don't know, like 10K or something, and he just obliterates the slate, like that seems like a thing too, where there could be some chalk plays or some weeks where you want to go with the ADC chalk or the AD carry chalk just to not get completely fall out of the field.
Yeah. So you have to roster like one of all of these guys anyway. So the differentiation is coming from who you roster as your captain. last night, again, I'm going to use last night as an example. Asura was like 16% owned, but he scored 200 points. So you're just kind of like, okay, there's like, that's a lot of points. It's the most points I've ever seen scored in League of Legends Daily Fantasy Sports.
Oh, wow.
It was insane. So if you didn't have Asura captain, you might not win. You're probably going to cash, but you might not win. Fortunately, he was expensive. So in this instance, even if you had Asura captain, it was hard to get other pieces that you felt comfortable with.
Mm.
So it wasn't a guarantee that you were going to do well. It just so happened that last night the cheapos came through. So Asura captain was the nuts.
Gotcha.
But sometimes you could have Asura captain and then your team just gets smoked and it's like, okay, I have Asura captain, so I have like 300 points. Like, that's it.
But there will be just as many days where there's an outlier AD carry performance from one of the cheaper guys, and then you're screwed if he gets you just an average performance and this other guy greatly outperforms.
Yeah. It's always difficult to trust cheap AD carries, but you always want some of them strictly because you want them. There's only 30 players in most LPL slates, which is not a lot of players. So having some of everybody is never terrible.
So here's a question from Twitch right now from Peregrine Man on there saying, should we prioritize stacking ADC with support? And support is the next position up. And in fact, Jeremy addresses this in his article that he wrote, which I posted a link into in the YouTube chat, talking about support. These are the babysitters, the scrappy third liners, bottom of the order hitters, and third receivers. If you can find a good ADC, most of the time you'll want the support with them. One way to be different is not stacking your ADC and support. So take me through it here, because it seems like the way that you wrote this up, that these are the guys who are probably cheaper and also probably going to rise with the tide of the ADC, but maybe not necessarily be worth stacking with the ADC because maybe there's not pulling their weight enough and the ADC is still doing well without them. So how do you feel about support here? How do you feel like they break down in terms of stacking and general lineup construction?
So I'd say from just a strict baseline that you want your AD carry stacked with your support, just like baseline. Like, it's probably better more often than not, because if your AD carry is scoring, your support's probably also scoring a lot of points. In double AD carry lineups where you roster an AD carry captain, you're obviously only going to have one support. So that's a little bit different. But if you don't have double AD carry, as in an AD carry captain, one way to be different is to not roster the support and kind of hope that the support just doesn't get it done.
So in that kind of situation, then where would you look for a support? Would you just draw, the best value play, or because it seems like based on your write-up, this would be a position to maybe save if you don't pair your support with your ADC.
Oh yeah, supports are always pretty cheap, and the thing with League of Legends DFS is that certain teams have different like placed position or different. Okay, they might have like the most expensive top laner and the fourth most expensive support. So it's very like flexible in how they're priced within a slate sometimes. So you might have like the fourth expensive support, and you can't really like flex to something else you want. So it really just depends on the pricing on the slate. What can you get to? How comfortable are you with not having your support with the AD carry?
Gotcha. Okay. And interesting there. So I guess one question I would have then would, like, let's say you have a cheap AD carry and you have, whatever price support guy. Would it be logical if you had the cheaper AD carry to stack with support then, because you're saving money there? And it feels like AD carry, you could find guys have outlier performances without the support being part of it. So would you be more inclined to stack if it's a cheaper guy? Like, kind of the same thing if you stack a cheap quarterback with a cheap receiver, like, those guys are either going to go up together or they're going to fail together.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good way to put it, is that typically for the teams that are not favored in a series, you'll see the AD carry and the support be very consistently varianced. As in, like, when one hits their ceiling, the other is probably like right there, right behind them.
Okay, cool. All right, so that makes sense. All right, so now let's talk about the general lineup construction thing. People asking a lot of questions about how to stack here. People already aware. I saw Osmo tweeted the value of the 4-3 stacks. People asking about 4-2-1 stacks. So we're obviously familiar with the concept of stacking from some of the other sports, as Jeremy mentions in that article again, which I'll drop the link in the chat one more time right now. We're used to the concept of it, but stacking going to be different here than it may be in some of the, obviously, MLB, where you have different constructions, your 5-3 stacks or whatever you may have. How is the general stacking outlook look for you, Jeremy? What would you say is like a best practice stack that you'd want the most, even if you do differentiate in tournaments?
Like if I were telling someone that didn't want to do any research and just wanted to just jam some lineups into a contest that might have some overlay, I would just say pick 4 players from one team and 3 players for another team and don't worry about it. Just from like a strict baseline standpoint, don't worry about any projections or teams. Pick 4 from one team and 3 from another team and hope they go off. That's where I would start.
Wait, but not necessarily in the same game.
Oh yeah, you can't. You had to have at least two different games picked.
Gotcha.
Like,
Okay. So you could do like a 4-2-1, but you couldn't do a 4-3 from the same game.
Yeah, if you want a game stack, like strictly game stack, that's super risky. That's very risky because then you have to have like in the LPL or the LCK, you have to have 2 or 3 huge kill total games, and it just doesn't happen very frequently. But when it does, and if you have it, you're gonna win big.
So it seems like this is the most comparable to baseball, though. In my, to my knowledge base, I'm not as much of a NHL DFS player, so I think there are some similarities there. But in baseball, you're usually going with 5-3 stacks, or depending on your site, 4-3-1s, whatever the case may be. It seems like overall that's the approach. So would you say even if you went like 4-1-1-1 or whatever, like the 4 is the important part of stacking 4 men from a team generally is going to be the best approach?
I would say that in general, having at least 1 stack of 4 is more correct than not.
Gotcha.
You could probably get away with some 3-3-1s, and it's a good way to be different in large field tournaments. But mostly 4 is what you're going to end on with, at least with one team.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess if you went with, let's say, a cheaper stack, then you could theoretically load up with your with a 1-1-1 or a 2-1.
Again, it's like very risky because you need a lot of. The more games you add into it, the more positive results you have. So it is kind of like baseball, to where if one team scores like 9 runs in 2 innings, and it's just kind of like all of them, you just want all of them. Whereas if you like only have the 3 and 4 hole hitters and they go like 0 for 6 and the team scores 9 runs, you're just kind of like, well, that sucks.
Right. So, but I guess the one difference is that you like the other team is going to go down with the it's not like baseball where they're independent events where the offense yeah, like here, if one team's doing really well, the other team's likely getting drubbed for the most part.
Yeah, correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel like there's a best position to save money at? Like, is there one that more often than not you're finding that, hey, I could get somebody cheaper here who works well? I know pitcher and MLB DFS is one spot where you load up sometimes on a high price pitcher in your SP2 on DraftKings. You'll go to some guy who's terrible, but playing also a terrible team in the hopes that he gets you enough results. Is there somewhere where you're saving money more often than not in your League of Legends lineups?
That's tricky because I think it is more dependent on how teams are priced. Like I mentioned earlier, you might have the most expensive top laner and the 4th most expensive support. So just by proxy, the team, the 4th most expensive support is just going to be kind of like the value because he's probably on the team that's favored and he's also really cheap.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of how value, in my opinion, would work because just the favorites are the favorites and they're going to be the most expensive players. So value comes from taking the underdogs, not necessarily from picking good players on good teams.
Is there any situation similar to, to basketball, let's say, where you have a guy who's at 3K, the day that it all went south for the NBA, Rudy Gobert was ill that day. Tony Bradley was going to start there. People just locked him in for the most part because you assume he's a good per minute guy. Is that a situation that occurs in League of Legends, especially the leagues where we do have lineup changes and some of that where it's a bit more fungible?
Not really. There's not really like a minimum priced individual that's just going to go off. But as you mentioned, there are substitutions, and most of the time the substitutes are a little bit cheaper. So sometimes you can get better lineups by playing the substitute, but it carries more risk. It depends on how risk averse you are. If you're willing to accept the risk that if they lose the first game, they might be taken out, then you can get really, really good lineups with like good teams sometimes. But if you don't want to take the risk, that's totally fine.
How often do teams sub out, or like is there a consistent rotation if they're doing that, or is it just like sometimes it happens for whatever reason?
It depends on the team, but most of the time you don't expect to see that many substitutions on any given slate. So like, yeah.
And once a guy is subbed, he's not allowed back in, or is he allowed back
No,
in?
he can come back in.
Okay.
Like Light 2 days ago, he started against Victory 5. He played the first 2 games. They lost the second game, and then he got taken out, and the normal starting AD carry came back in.
Gotcha. Okay, so it does happen. All right, so just make it again. I apologize for any questions, Jeremy, or anybody out there watching that are completely idiotic sounding for somebody who knows, but really trying to make sure we establish all the baseline information before we move on. And one last question on lineup construction, and I'll dig through some of these YouTube questions. If you have any more, please drop them into whatever chat you're watching on, whether it be Periscope or on Twitch or on YouTube. I will see them come through. Any general lineup questions, we'll do that before we talk about tomorrow's big slate for the LCS. But is there any stacks you would actively avoid? This is one that I put into our production sheet here with, a running back and a quarterback. Osmo has advocated against that a lot on some of the streams that we've done because a lot of the running back salary is tied into his rushing upside. For a guy like James White, maybe it's fine, but for most traditional running backs, you're not going to get as much of a value as you'd want from having your quarterback stacked with them. So there's stacks you would outwardly avoid when building lineups here that you find just would be a non-starter in a League of Legends lineup for you.
Not really, because the non-starter part of it, like I guess it's also the same in the NFL. Is like you'll be different,
Right.
but in League of Legends, it's anything can happen. Like I said, it's hard to know what's going to happen in a game before the champions are picked, and so I don't think there's really any positions I wouldn't want to play with each other.
Gotcha.
At all.
Okay.
I think everything is viable.
So, all right. So that, no, I mean, look, sometimes that's the answer. And ultimately, not the one that people want to hear because they want to hear the most direct, picky type information. But, you got to keep an open mind here. And especially as the field gets sharper, as Jeremy mentioned earlier, it's going to be a situation where you'll see people applying the best practices a lot across the board. And GPP, especially the large field ones, definitely a chance that there's some differentiation that occurs there from what we're expecting and what we've discussed. Once again, the League of Legends projections we have are free on the site right now, as along with all of our other content on Osmo.com. Let's go to Osmo.com/esports right now if you want to see the projections. Actually, do we have? I'm not sure if they're up for tomorrow yet. Let's see. No, because we don't have LCS up, I don't think, unless I'm missing it. But let me just double check. Yeah, we got LPL updated an hour ago. I mean, there's a bunch of slates tomorrow. But
there's a lot of slates.
I guess, Jeremy, do you want to give like a quick overview on all the slates? We know we want to talk most about the LCS. It is our North American League, the one with the big money up top on DraftKings, the 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. East Coast start time. But just a brief primer on the first couple slates tomorrow, Jeremy, if you can. Like, what do you think about those? Is there one do you find more appealing than the others? And then we could talk about the LCS.
The LPL slate tonight is an odd slate. Just from a team perspective, from a team standpoint, I think that slate will be very interesting in what wins. I think this is a slate that'll have like a surprising first place finisher. Just from a cursory glance, I haven't super dove into it yet, but just looking at the teams, this is an interesting set of teams. Yeah, it's just a really interesting set of teams.
Gotcha.
LEC tomorrow is, let's see. Nothing really super stands out in LEC tomorrow. 2 of the bottom features are playing tomorrow for the LEC in the LEC. But that's about the only thing that like super stands out to me right now.
Okay,
the LEC. Yeah.
So the LCS slate is the big one, 5 games tomorrow. I guess the LEC one also has 5 games, but a weird start time for the Pacific folks. 9 a.m. start time for that one. But 2 p.m. as I mentioned for Pacific time for LCS, 5 p.m. East Coast time there. We got 5 games. So let's dig in a little bit more. And I guess, Jeremy, if you can, just what would be your overview on the slate? What is the game you feel is the most important, first of all?
I think the most important game getting correct for tomorrow on the LCS slate will be the Dignitas and CLG game, because those 2 teams are kind of they're in last. They're the bottom 2 teams. Dignitas started off really hot, and then they've cooled off greatly in the last few weeks. And CLG has just kind of been bad the whole season. But do you want to buy low on Dignitas, or are they going to keep like just not performing? Like that would be the thing that will open up if you can get that right, it'll open up a lot of lineups with the more expensive teams.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's one game that you're advocating to watch for. And I guess one question too, that which we didn't touch on, for the team roster spot, how are you approaching that? And how does that correlate with the other plays that we've discussed so far?
The team spot correlates very loosely with everybody. Like the jungler will typically be making plays around the dragon and the baron and pressuring towers, but they don't really get any benefit. The junglers don't get any benefit for doing that. It just benefits the team. Like they're crucial in making that happen, but the junglers don't get any direct benefit for doing it.
Gotcha. So that would be a spot where you would want the team, but not the jungler in a lineup potentially?
Yeah, well, fights happen around objectives. I'll also say that. So a lot of action happens around dragons and barons and tower dives and stuff. So having the jungler and the team is still like completely fine.
Got it. Okay. And then people in the Twitch chat right now, Audio Tsunami, saying a lot of things about the
oh
team
my
objectives.
God, that's my friend. Ignore him.
Well, he's being helpful.
You have my permission.
He's talking about teams getting points on objectives. I guess take us through real fast. How do teams score points? As you kind of intimated around it there, but team scoring that's not a reflection of necessarily like kills and things like that, I'm assuming. But how does the scoring for a team work?
So you get 2 points for first blood. So if you kill the first champion in the game, the team gets 2 points, alongside everyone else getting the points for the players. There are 11 turrets in the game. That means you can score 11 points with turrets. Dragons spawn at 5 minutes, and then after you kill it, they spawn every 5 minutes after the time you kill it. Barons spawn at 20 minutes, and typically only 1 or 2 of those get taken down a game. Dragons, you can have 4, 5, 6 taken down in a game. So you can really rack up points as a team taking dragons. Yeah.
But individual players also get those stats, or those only go to the team?
They don't get any. The players get none of the points for killing dragons or barons at all.
Gotcha.
The first blood is different because you get the kill. So anyone who had kills and assists still get the points for that.
Gotcha. Okay. So there's, okay. I get where we're going now. So there's really not much correlation at all between the players and the team results, even though there isn't really in terms of the fantasy production.
Yes, correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then which players do you feel like are the most important here to roster? Like I guess the best way to put it, like I'm assuming there aren't going to be a lot of League of Legends cash games going on necessarily from some of the new players, but who do you feel like are the obvious cash plays that you would feel like you're very comfortable with? And also at the same time, are there any traps that are really obvious that you're like, this guy is the trappiest trap and I'm just going to avoid him, and a new player might not know that?
So like for cash game lineups, you're probably going to be playing a lot of TSM and C9 tomorrow in the LCS. I'm presuming you can get to top lane captains, because like top lane captains don't offer a lot of ceiling, but typically you can get 2 of the teams that are favored. So you're expecting your team to just win and score okay and cash, because that's the goal. You just want to cash, you want to get the wins, you want to get okay scores, and yeah, that's it. It's cash game. The biggest trap for me on this slate is probably Immortals. They are not expensive, but they're more expensive than what I would think they should be. And I think they will be maybe more popular than they should be, because they had a really good game their last time out, but they are inconsistent, and they're facing the second tied for second place team.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess a similar question, which you may have kind of answered in this process, but if you had to lean on a team to stack this week, which one do you feel like, or if you want to give a couple that you feel particularly strong about, which would be the ones that you think are the strongest candidates for you to stack for this big tournament with the LCS?
I will be trying to get as much TSM and C9 as possible, because they get the most kills on average per game. Cloud9, C9, they average 15.1 kills per game, which is 3.5 more kills a game than any other team. So like, if however much C9 I can get, like I'm gonna try and get as much as I can. That's basically it.
And similarly, is there a team that jumps out to you that you're thinking about fading? It feels like the Immortals would be the one that you were advocating about as potentially being a trap, but is there anybody else, or would they just be the one that you're like, I'm fading them and that's pretty much where it's going to go?
it would probably just be Immortals, because I like playing Immortals when I don't think they'll be popular, and I think they might be. I think a lot of people might look at them and think it's kind of sneaky, but I don't think it's very sneaky.
Okay. Which is a big part. I mean, it's funny to hear you talk about this in the same way we talk about every other sport, but that's basically what we're dealing with, where, people, ownership, always a difficult thing. And if you can predict ownership, that's going to be a valuable part. We do not have ownership projections that I'm aware of thus far, but I'm sure in the future, with the time that we'll have going, I'm sure something that our fine folks in the background are working on. Let's see here. Any good questions in chat? Anything else that we haven't hit on? Actually, we talked about strategies for selecting team. This guy, Brooklyn guy, killed in a private contest on DK. Good job by you. Best position stacks. Do the stacks differentiate for you in any of the different leagues, or is it mostly uniform across the board?
It's mostly uniform. If you're playing a lot of lineups, you're gonna have kind of all of the different kinds of stacks you can have also.
Okay.
Like if you're playing a top lane captain, then you're probably gonna leave out the jungler one time, then the mid laner, and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah. Anything that we haven't hit on? I'm putting in one last call for questions in the YouTube chat right now. So if anybody has any on there, please feel free to drop them in right now, and we'll try to get them before we jump off here. But Jeremy, anything that we haven't hit on? I tried to be as thorough as I could be for the folks here jumping in for the new time, like I will be for tomorrow's slate. But anything that we haven't hit on, do you feel like is particularly important for what you do in your process, or anything that might just slip somebody up that we haven't hit on at all?
I can't really think about it or anything. A lot of league is, I don't know how I want to word that, but I think we've done like a pretty okay job, like a pretty good job of going through the important things, the very important things. And yeah.
Pretty okay is where I thrive, Jeremy. That's what.
that was poor word, but that's okay.
You're on the nose. You're already getting the brand here right away. But we appreciate all you guys watching this one. Again, hit the like button. Let's see. Sal Vetri, our boy, who'll be doing the stream tomorrow with Osmo. Again, live before lock tomorrow at, I believe, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. East Coast time. We'll be going live for this one. Here's a question on Twitch from Oh My Dur. What stats are most important using GOL.GG? I know you mentioned these earlier, but one more time for Oh My Dur. What stats do you find to be the most important to look at on GOL.GG, the stat hub for Game of Legends, or League of Legends?
For players, you want to look at kill participation, and to a lesser extent, creep score, CS per minute. For teams, you want to look at dragon percentage, barons, first blood percentage, how long games last, or they're not important, but it helps figure out like how consistently fast or slow some games are, because longer games tend to have more creep score. And if you have a long game, it can also be a high kill game. So it varies. But like for teams, dragons, barons, kills per game, and for players, it would just be kill participation and creep score mostly.
Okay. And also Sal Vetri, this is what I was going to get to before I kind of got distracted. He's saying that FanDuel scoring lets teams get the same scores as players now, trying to figure out how to go about that. I mean, that's a whole different world, and I'm sure one that you haven't taken much of a look at yet, Jeremy, but how do you feel about the FanDuel scoring and how they're handling teams?
FanDuel, I opened it yesterday to kind of play, because I have some lineups for the LAC that's happening right now. And you have to play 3 teams on FanDuel, which was crazy. So I was like, oh, I got my 4-3 stack. I'm ready to go. Hit the button. Nope, you had to play 3 players. And then I looked deeper into the scoring, and I was like, wow, teams are actually going to score a little bit more. I have to actually look into this a lot more. That's basically where I'm at right now, is I want to see how this goes today before I jump to crazy conclusions.
Gotcha. No, I mean, it's a new ground, because FanDuel hasn't done these at all, right?
They haven't done them on FanDuel.
Gotcha. Okay.
4 years ago, they had an offsite that they own that they just did esports DFS.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, that was the Paddy Power overarching company thing?
It was Alpha Draft.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. And then Justin in the YouTube chat asking right now, do you not take into account average kills, deaths, assists? You're just looking at kill participation, or you're not, are you looking at those stats at all, or do they just not rate for you?
You look at them, but kill participation is like accumulation of all of that, kind of, because if a team has like 20 kills and you participate in 80% of them, then you're going to have a lot of kills and assists just because of that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think we got everybody's questions here. So right now, make sure you go to Twitter, follow at Pick'emGenius. That is where Jeremy lives on Twitter. But I assume you don't actually live on Twitter there.
No, I live on Twitter. I have a nice 2-bedroom apartment.
Nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful setup here on Twitter. But no, go follow at Pick'emGenius, PICKEM Genius. I'm sure you can spell genius. Go follow him. He'll be doing all of his content on there, and I'm sure all of his articles as well. Jeremy's been very prolific for us so far. Follow me at Chris Spags and Jeremy. Anything else you want to plug here before we call it quits? I'm not sure we'll jump on next, but I'm sure I'll be back for another strategy show where I'll know slightly more and appear less like a complete simpleton to the folks out there who actually do know things.
League is still not solved. Like I know a lot, but I'm still learning a lot by playing it. So don't get frustrated by playing it. Just keep trusting your process, and yeah, good luck. Go win some tournaments.
Right, yeah, play the big tournaments tomorrow, guys. A lot of the simple formats or similar formats that you know into the other sports. You have the max 20s on DK, which I think I'll probably be giving a shot to, as well as the big ones with 50K up top. But go check it out. To give it a chance here, Jeremy's done a great job building the resources for us, and he'll be on more streams moving forward. And I appreciate all you guys watching. Tune in tomorrow, live before lock with Alex and Sal, going at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. East Coast time. So watch them before the LCS slate kicks off. League of Legends, it is our life now. And later tonight, tune into the NBA 2K simulations. Those are going on strong. So just subscribe, hit the notification bell to know whenever this content's coming up, because we are finding ways to fill the time here in the world of DFS and sports betting. And we appreciate you guys watching. So we'll see you guys again soon, and enjoy your weekends and weeks. Bye, guys.